Do you have a webcomic? Do you think to yourself sometimes, oh man, I don't want to work on this comic anymore. If only there was someone who had some advice for me. Hello, my name is Chris. I am the creator of a webcomic called Seventh Heaven, and I had the exact same struggle. In the background, you can see my speed paint for the new cover art since the old one was pretty outdated. I created my first comic in 2017 called Fantasy of God. I worked on that comic on and off until 2019, where I decided to stop the series for now. After pausing it, I started to miss making comics, so I created Seventh Heaven in March of 2020. I worked on it until July, and then for a whole year there was nothing. I had lost my motivation. Then again in 2021, I released 2 more chapters. And then I dropped it again, losing my motivation again. So what happened? Why am I making this video? I think you can already tell what happened. I lost my motivation, which was a huge shame since it actually performed quite good on tapas at the time. I stopped because I always told myself I don't have time working full time in the hospital, spending all my free time just drawing fan art of shows I liked or watching anime. Either way, I just never was in the mood to work on it. But I started to work on my webcomic again this year, and since then I released 5 whole chapters, making it a total of 10 chapters now. I am having so much fun working on it again, and I have been consistent for about 6 months now. I want you to feel the same about your webcomic. Little disclaimer, I just want to mention that all of these tips come from my personal experience making a webcomic. Everyone works differently, so what motivates me might not motivate you, and that's totally okay. So let's start with the actual part of the video. 5 ways to stay motivated while making a webcomic. Let's start off with a more weird one that personally helps me a lot when I don't want to look at the comic anymore. Create alternative universes, also known as AUs, for your characters. I have the problem when I constantly work on my comic and I see the exact same characters all of the time. Sometimes it just gets boring. I start to forget why I love them so much and why I started a comic just to tell their story. That's totally normal. It's like when you work from 9 to 5, see the same people every day, the same task, the same routine. At first, it's exciting. You're learning something new every day. But when you do nothing else for on and on and on, you just need a change of scenery. That's where the idea of creating AUs for your OCs comes in. How would your OC look as a vampire? Would his morals change? What would be his goal in this kind of world? Would he still fall in love with their love interest? What if their love interest was a werewolf in this AU? And now you have a monster AU where you think about how much your OCs and the story would change if you just change the scenery. In my case, I learned that putting my OCs, Chris and Eric, in different AUs helped me to also learn more about my characters. I, for example, have a night AU for them, where they work together and fight wars and have to hide their relationship to not get executed by the village. It made me think of complex situations the characters would face, learning how they could maybe solve problems in the actual webcomic series. And now comes the best part. You feel the same excitement you felt at the beginning of making your webcomic. But instead of starting a new project that you will just lay aside again, you use the exact same characters, making you fall in love with them even more and getting to know them even better. For Chris and Eric, I have a night AU where they both are knights, a hospital AU where Chris works as an operation technician and Eric works as an EMT, and at last, a horror AU where they document crimes. There are so many AUs that you could do. Vampires, horror, survival, monster, the list goes on. I actually even made some art for the Night and Hospital AU. It just gets you going into making art and therefore working on your webcomic. I encourage you to try it out yourself. Tell me what kind of alternate universes you come up with. Let's continue with the second way to keep motivated. Create a playlist based on your OCs or your webcomic. I believe this one is pretty self-explanatory, but I'm gonna go into it anyway. I just love talking about webcomics and OCs. Music can express a lot of emotions and memories, and you can use that to your advantage. You can just select songs that remind you of your webcomic and put them in one playlist to listen through. Make it pretty by choosing a nice album cover and having a cool name for it. Then listen to it. Listen to it when going on a walk, driving in your car, or even working on your comic. Maybe you could even listen to it while browsing Pinterest in search of some inspiration pictures for your webcomic. I'm quite sure in that playlist there will be songs that once listened will remind you of the time you started to work on your webcomic, and that kind of feeling can help you give that one push that makes you pull out your drawing tablet and start a new page. I, for example, have a few songs in my playlist that remind me of scenes that haven't been released yet, that oftentimes make me really want to start working on my comic to get to those parts. Can you believe I even have a playlist for the night and hospital AU? Once I am sick of the songs of the 7th Heaven comic playlist, I switch to one of the AUs and still get inspired, since it's the same characters, but again, a different scenery or more like a different vibe. You don't have to go sit down now and work on your playlist until it's finished. You can build it bit by bit, go through your favorite songs, and the one that match you can add to your playlist. Maybe there is a new TikTok trending song that would fit perfectly into your story. A playlist for your OCs or your webcomic is really great to have. It helped me out a lot of times, and I hope it can help you as well. 2 ways down, only 3 hours remaining. So for the third part, it's to let loose sometimes and work on the fun parts.
But Chris, shouldn't working on the comic be the fun part?
And to that I say, yes and no, it is a difficult mix. You should be having fun on your webcomic. That is one of the most important things if you want to become a webcomic artist. But if you do nothing except work on chapter after chapter after chapter, it gets difficult to keep up the fun meter. You constantly need to learn new things while working on the comic. You have to figure out how the panels would fit perfectly together. You need to figure out the perspective of a certain plant that's in the background of the room. Let alone making the backroom can be really difficult. Trying to figure out all the proportions of the interior and how to even fill the room. And if you do nothing else, it can get overwhelming. It makes you want to stop working since it becomes more of a burden than fun. Well, that's what happened to me. If you notice these things happen to you too, then I suggest you try to work on some other things. You can decide yourself what that means to you. But for me, I draw fan art of my comic, drawing them in different situations. Maybe I saw a funny TikTok trend that I really want to see in my characters, then I start working on that. Seeing my characters be animated makes me so proud every time. And sometimes I do mini comics. The most recent one I did, I drew my OCs, Eric and Chris, walking through the rain, not having an umbrella, and afterwards they both got completely soaked in the rain. Or how they have a sleepover. It just lets your brain relax for a bit, not having to think about all the complex things that make up a comic. Seeing them in these silly daily situations makes me want to work on the comic again. Also, it helps to advertise your comic when you post these things on social media. Of course, you can also do some other things, but those are the things that help me to get motivated again, since it's still based on my own characters and it just makes me want to continue the story for them. The next point is one that I learned when I needed to study for my nurse exams. It's to romanticize the process of your projects. This might sound insane, but trust me on that one. When I needed to study, I really didn't want to. But instead of just doing nothing, I romanticized it. I changed the lighting in my room to be more aesthetic. I listened to lo-fi, made myself a fancy drink, and just imagined I'm one of those aesthetic influencers or students working on their things. And it helped a lot. It made the whole thing of studying so much more fun. Why am I talking about my study sessions? Well, simply said, I took the concept and put it into my webcomic process. Is maybe the weather outside nice? Dress nicely and comfy, then go outside, make yourself cozy in a cute cafe, order yourself a nice drink of choice, and start working on your webcomic. It doesn't matter if you work on the story, character designs, or even on pages. You can imagine to be one of those aesthetic, mysterious artists working on their stuff, while everybody is wondering what you are working on. I personally always love to see these people in cafes that have their MacBook and some notebooks, typing away while sipping on their coffee. So I just started doing the same, and it's great. You are in a different scenery, you are basically forced to work on it since you already put in the effort to go outside, and believe me, it really gets you going. Not a big fan of going outside? You can do the exact same thing at home too. Find a nice spot, maybe you have LED lights, you can turn them into a cozy pink or purple color, and start working on your webcomic. Maybe you can even take a photograph of your setup that looks aesthetic and post it on your Instagram story. Just romanticize the process and you feel a lot more like a true webcomic artist. At least I do. I saved the best for last. Well, at least this point works out for me the absolute best. It is to daydream about your comic. Yes, you heard me right, daydreaming. In my opinion, this is the most fun part and the one that motivates me the most and gets my creativity flowing. You don't always have time to work on your comic. After all, life is extremely busy. So what I do is, I use the time that I am not able to work on my story to just imagine it, and I mean this in various ways. You can daydream about the story, how you would visually imagine scenes to be like in the comic that you are very excited about, adding some details here and there. You can also daydream about your story being animated. Just imagine how the opening would look like. How would the first episode be? What would the voices of your characters sound like? I believe you can still imagine these kinds of things even if you never plan on making it an animated series. It's still fun to fantasize about. Maybe it will help you to imagine how many new readers you might have in the future, imagining the number. I am a strong believer that numbers aren't everything. It's about releasing your story to the world. But let's be honest, it's still nice to dream about making it big one day. Don't compare yourself to other creators and be sad how much more growth they have. See them as an inspiration and a motivator. Just imagine how you will hit these numbers in maybe 1 year. What would you do with that amount of attention? One of my dreams, for example, is to be independent, since I work full-time as a nurse, and it's pretty hard. But when I imagine how my life could be working on my comic as a living, traveling around the world to sell my merch, and having a little online shop, I just get so inspired to work more and more. Talking about selling merch, how would your merch look like of your Cs? Would you just make keychains? How would they look like? How would you design the boxes? Would you put in some free stickers as a thank you? Just making this video and talking about all these things makes me want to work on the next chapter for 7th. And if you get bored of just daydreaming about your regular OCs, which I don't think will happen, you can do the exact same thing with the first point I have mentioned to you. Daydream about the alternative universes you have made of them. And the best thing is, you can do this everywhere. At work, while driving your car, walking your dog, using the train. I love to daydream when I go out with my dog at night. The darkness helps me to get a better focus on the visuals in my head. I listen to the playlist I created for my webcomic. I breathe in the fresh air of the night, and I even romanticize this process. And after daydreaming all day at work, I get home and I just want to immediately work on my comic. I encourage you to try it out. I really do. Personally, it helps me so much. And that's all I have for you today. I hope I could help you out a little bit with these tips. And hey, let me know if you tried them and how they helped. I would love to hear some feedback. Also, is there something that motivates you and I didn't mention? Let me know as well. Maybe that can help me out too. Okay, on a personal note here. This is the first time I ever made a video like this, and I hope it wasn't too bad. You can check out my webcomic 7th on Webtoon and Tapas. Links are in the description. Maybe like and subscribe if you feel like it. Would be very much appreciated. Thank you for listening and take care. Bye!